P-A-S-C-A-L. You are now rocking with that dude Pascal. We be going wild, Haitian in the building, so original. Got the haters catching feelings. Get your hands up to the ceiling and keep them held high, cause St. Louis isn't ready. Forget about it, goodbye. Hold up, we just saying hi. Five somebody, rise up weekdays. Catch us live, somebody, let's go.
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Pascal Show. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Hope this show finds you in great spirits. We need that more than ever nowadays with all the chaos and mucky muck that's going on out here in these streets. But I hope you guys are all doing well. I wanted to come on here and talk with you guys and bring, of course, a very, very fantastic friend of ours. Okay, big time family member of ours to the show. You'll be seeing Andrea Burkhart here in just a minute. But I wanted to give you guys some updates, and we wanted to discuss with you guys the updates that have been going on within the Bryan Kohberger hearings. This is some crazy stuff, okay? After having some very insightful conversations, intense conversations about certain things, I'm quite vexed, y'all. I said it. Let me just stop the music for a second. I'm vexed. I'm quite vexed, guys. You might be going, why are you vexed, Pascal? Well, because there's a lot of stuff going on here within this case that are kind of pointing down the avenue of not something that I would want to hear, because I've been on the side of him guilty for a long time. Now, as we're hearing more information, etc., now that we have our good friend coming onto the show here very shortly, my visage is widening. How's that? Okay. So I got questions. There's a lot of stuff that happened today, and there's a lot of stuff that didn't happen today during the hearings, which we are going to be talking about here in just a minute. But please do me a favor. Before we get into everything, it's some crazy stuff, y'all. Like, I'm vexed. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm vexed. All right. So do me a favor. It's my new SAT word, by the way, vexed. Okay. But anyway, please do me a favor, some housekeeping. Hit that like button down below, especially if you like my use of SAT words. Hit that like button down below. Send it past 300 likes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, okay? You know for a fact your boy's working hard out here in these streets to give you conversation, and the conversations and the stories that you need for the day. So please hit that subscribe button, all right? We out here growing, which is amazing, all right? And of course, I'm going to ask you guys to go and subscribe to Andrea Burkhart's channel as well here in just a little bit, because she is a fantastic individual as well. And she's extremely knowledgeable, and I'll explain here in just a little bit more. And if you guys haven't watched her or been on the show and with her on here, you're in for a fantastic treat, because she is a fantastically, wonderfully talented and smart lawyer. Please welcome Andrea Burkhart to the show. Hello, Andrea. How you doing?
Hey, Pascal. Doing great.
Again, I want to say thank you so much for being here, because, for us regular Joes, it is kind of helpful to see things in a more in the eyesight, or in the way that, say, a lawyer looks at this information. Because myself, I'm just a regular guy, just trying to tell people stories or give them information. But it is really important when we get to see the professionals explain it more thoroughly. And it, like I said, it can avert or change people's opinions about how things are going right now. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm sure you agree with me, things aren't looking good right now for prosecution, given the fact that there's been so much more new information coming out on the defense side. Before we go into the trial, which, of course, let me show you guys here real quick, so that you guys can all, so that you guys can all see. All right, there was a trial. They were out. I just paused it because there's a moment here that I wanted to play for you guys here in just a little bit. But they were in trial today. There were supposed to be several different hearings. There were supposed to be several different topics. 4 different ones, by the way. 4 motions that were supposed to be addressed. Only one was addressed today, which I found to be very, very interesting. Now, we're going to be talking about that here in just a minute. So, Andrea, I know that we have a lot going on here. And I know that as far as the 4 motions that came out, there were a lot of claims in there that were absolutely shocking. And I know that you've talked about this at great detail and fantastic detail on your own video, which I will make sure I send a link and put it into the chat, you guys, so you guys can see it for yourselves. But you even said yourself at the very beginning of the video, you said, I'm not one for clickbaity crap. I'm not here for the tabloidy stuff. But bombshell is the only word that I can think of when you're talking about the information that came from Bryan Kohberger's defense team. Now, can we talk a little bit about that before we go into the hearings themselves? Okay. Yes. I understand that there were 4 motions that were supposed to be addressed today, but everything got let out early. You were there. You were boots on the ground. I was expecting at this time you were going to be outside the courtroom holding the cell phone and all that, and you're not.
Nope.
So
I made it all the way back home.
You made it all the way back home. I'm thinking, I'm sitting there chilling, expecting to get a text from you being like, yeah, I'm ready. They just wrapped. Court is adjourned. Where, I'll be right outside in front of the brick wall type thing. And you're like, no, I'm home. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
There's so much stuff they had to go through. So Can you give us a little bit of insight as far as your video before we go into the court stuff? The bombshell information.
Yes.
What was so bombshelly for you about it?
The bombshell information is a representation that is made under a duty of candor to the tribunal. Okay, the special responsibility lawyers have to a court when they're making representations of fact about a case. Statements made that the state has no connection. They found no connection between Bryan Kohberger and any of the victims in this case. So that suggests that all of this digital fingerprinting that we thought might be out there with like social media surveillance and contacts and attempted messaging and stuff like that, apparently, no, is not fruitful. That was not located. But then the piece that to me is just enormously significant. No victim DNA recovered from any of the places they've searched, most significantly his car. Just because given the state's theory of how this murder was committed, the time frame in which it was committed, and Bryan Kohberger's activity in driving there, committing it, and then driving away. From my perspective, it is a physiological impossibility that somebody would be able to stab 4 people, in a pretty brutal killing, and just walk away with that without leaving any trace of it.
Right. In that course of time, in that short course of time. Yes. And then not even having one drop walking out of the building, out of the house, etc. Nothing found in the snow, found nowhere. That seems a little bit odd as well. Yeah, it's an anomaly, right? It's like who shot JFK kind of situation in a way. The magic bullet theory and all that. Now, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, Google it, okay? But moving on from that, now this is the question I have for you, and we were talking about it before we went on. Now, this is just a defense. This is what the defense is presenting, right?
Yes.
These are the motions that they're putting out here, which we are going to look at one of the motions because they only talked about one of them, guys. Only one of them today. So we are going to look at that in detail here shortly. But one of the things that they were saying, or main things, is they were saying a multitude of things, but they were saying things like no DNA in the car, no DNA on the bodies of the victims. There is no connection between Bryan Kohberger and the victims, so on and so forth. Now, that is what was being said on behalf of the defense. Now, my question for you is this, because this is the reason why, guys, I like having our lawyer friends on the show, mainly Andrea, okay, because she's very thorough. No stone unturned, okay? So now the question I have for you is that, are these just claims? Is this just what they're claiming to bring into as their narrative, as their argument for the case, or do they actually have evidence of lack of evidence?
Well, so lawyer statements are not evidence, and the jury is going to be specifically instructed to that effect when they're given the case to deliberate. But lawyers have very strict responsibilities with how they represent facts to the court. You can get yourself in a lot of ethical trouble by not being all that forthright with it. We saw, for example, in the opinion that just came out. With regard to the Mr. Gray's motion to be kind of exempted from the gag order, that the judge was, not impressed with the representations that he had made during that hearing. Mr. Thompson had called it out. The judge has called it out. So that type of thing is something that you don't want to be in that position. It's not a good place to be.
Okay.
It's lawyers' job to be precise with words. That's part of what you do. That's part of how it works. And so the fact that the defense here chose to use this extremely unequivocal language, they didn't say nothing in the discovery that we've been provided so far doesn't show this link. Nothing in the discovery that we've looked through, shows this link. No qualification like that. They said the state doesn't have it. And so that leads me to believe that they can back that up. That in this 51 terabytes of data that's been provided, these 30,000 photographs and reports and so forth, that does not contain any evidence of the DNA or connection with the victims.
Now, but the question I have for you then is, then why was prosecution, if that's the case, let's just say the defense has all this kind of proof showing that there's no DNA anywhere in the house, anywhere in the car, anywhere on no evidence on his phone, etc. All the stuff that they claimed. If that's true, same thing goes with the prosecution. All the evidence, all the information that they're putting out here, all that they have, everything that they have stacked up against Bryan Kohberger right now as we speak is a lie?
No, it's not a lie.
You got to remember, it's the same claims. They're saying, like what you're saying about the defense is the same thing we have to say about prosecution, right?
Well, the prosecution is who has the burden of proof. They're the ones that are responsible to prove that Bryan Kohberger committed these crimes. The defense can sit there and present no evidence and do nothing at all. And if the state doesn't meet its burden, he needs to be acquitted. That's the way that the legal system works. So it's not that they have a burden like to prove that the state didn't do any of these things. The problem is these are holes with the proof that the state is going to be presenting that the defense is going to be able to capitalize on. And so it's not that the state is lying or that the state is doing anything malicious here. The state just has an enormously weak circumstantial case. We're basically back in the position that we were at the time when the probable cause affidavit first came out. And so, okay, we've got this little bit of DNA on the knife sheath. We've got these pings. And then the hope was sort of that, well, now that we've identified him and arrested him, we're going to have access to all these other sources of evidence that are going to help us really corroborate that. I said at the time, I think I may have even said it on your show, that those warrants that were issued in those first days following his arrest, those were really going to be the do or die for the case, because they're either going to rule him in or rule him out. If a single little bit of victim DNA in that car and he's done. An Instagram message that he deleted somewhere, back on his phone, he's done. But they didn't get any of that. And so that is just a massive hole for the defense to be able to exploit, to point out, it's not that you have nothing, okay? Everybody that has been wrongfully convicted, there's been some reason to think, that they had something to do with it. The prosecutor didn't just walk into the trial and say, look at him, he's at the defense table, vote guilty. They had something. And so it's not that they have nothing in this case. It's just that it's a weak circumstantial case. It really needed to be corroborated by other evidence, because the defense is going to be able to give reasonable alternative explanations for the existence of that evidence. Transfer DNA is not a reliable indicator of direct contact. You cannot prove when and where and how that DNA was deposited on that item. And pings, we've talked, I did a video on that as well with the type of range that you're talking about for cell coverage in Moscow. This does not appear to be a precise technology. In their own probable cause affidavit, they acknowledge at least 2 occasions where his phone pinged somewhere that they knew he was not there. So that suggests, they were able to establish an alibi at some other location while his phone is pinging off this tower that's supposed to serve the King Road residents.
Interesting.
So these are big holes. That's why it needed that corroboration that just has not now come forward.
Well, I mean, I guess the main question is then why him? I mean, at the end of the day, right? Mm-hmm. Why Bryan Kohberger of all things? Of course, we could talk about that till we're blue in the face. But it does make it. I mean, that's the question I have screaming in my head.
Yeah. Well,
if it's not really him.
Yeah.
And if they say, which by the way, we should bring in the conversation too, given the fact that they're saying in what the defense is claiming is that they have 2 other sets of male DNA.
Yes.
That they have evidence of other male DNA in that house, aside from touch DNA. Mm-hmm. Then the question still remains, why him of all people? There's so many freakazoids in Moscow, I'm sure. Plenty of creepazoids. Plenty. Why him of all people? It just seems a bit odd, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, and the defense, it seems to be asking that question as well, because that's really the underlying message in this motion that did not get addressed today. But these questions that they're asking about the genetic genealogy, why and when did you focus on Bryan Kohberger? If it turns out that the reason why Bryan Kohberger was focused on is because this DNA sample, this touch DNA sample was recovered from the knife sheath, and that was submitted to a genealogy, researcher, and that researcher tipped it to tipped it back that you should look at Bryan Kohberger. And then the police start going through and looking at the pings and looking at the video and figuring out what model year Elantra is this and stuff like that. Well, you're starting to now have a situation that looks a little bit more of show me the man and I'll show you the crime, not a situation where the facts have naturally led you to this conclusion. It's that they got a tip, and based on that and based on their focus on this one piece of evidence, this touch DNA on the knife sheath, that they developed tunnel vision in essence. So they went all in on it being Bryan Kohberger, and as we're seeing, it may turn out that that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, they were willing to risk it all
just
for Bryan Kohberger. Again, I know that there's okay. I know that the climate, the court of public opinion's climate is starting to change now because of this information that's been coming out.
Yes,
I will say this. It does not automatically mean that he's innocent, though.
It doesn't.
It does not claim his innocence. Now,
no.
Still at the end of the day, it still has to. They have a job. The defense still has a job to do, just like prosecution, to show Swiss cheese holes of reasonable doubt. They just have to implant the reasonable doubt in the jury. Go ahead, please.
The defense has no job. The defense has no job, no burden. They can sit there silently the entire time. The job is 100% the state's. And he is presumed innocent. As we sit here today, he is presumed innocent until the state proves beyond a reasonable doubt that he's not. So, I mean, that's the posture that we're in. It's starting to look like a more difficult climb for the state to meet that burden as more of this information is coming out.
Interesting. Okay. And that's fair, but they still are presenting this information, right? They still have these, for example, the motion to compel discovery and all the other motions that they have brought up. So they're obviously trying to show something. They're at least trying to bring in some sort of narrative to at least implant some sort of reasonable doubt for the jury. That is if this actually sees trial.
Yes.
Unless this automatically gets dropped because of whatever, which is very interesting. Okay. Now let's get into, let me show you guys a little bit of this footage. I'm not playing a whole lot of it, but I want to show you guys just a tiny bit of the footage. Okay. This is what happened just a few hours ago. So let's take a look. Oh, come on. Of course, it's got to do this now. Hold on, guys. Just in case. Okay.
These are not things that are on the internet. They're not.
Of course, you're going to do that now. Sorry, guys. Internet. Because of the internet.
Or you could just hand them over to me. The two of the officers.
Son of a gun.
That we
You know what? I'm just doing it small.
About our Idaho State Police officers.
Not wanting to be my friend.
I have often received training records for Idaho State Police officers in the preparation of other.
I don't know what's going on, guys. The internet is acting strange right now. Well, as you guys, okay, let me just have this up so you guys can at least see this. Okay. There was the trial, or there was a hearing today. The only hearing that happened, because there was 4 different motions that they were supposed to address today. And those 4 did not happen. Or sorry, 3 did not happen. Only 1 went down, and that was the motion to compel discovery. So we're going to talk about that here just very, very quickly, or not very quickly, but we're going to talk about that more. So let me show you guys something that's reliable. Paper. So we're going to show you guys this right here. All right. So the motion to compel discovery comes now, BK, by and through his attorney, Taylor, the public defender, and pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 16, hereby moves the court to order the state to comply with defendant's first supplemental request for discovery filed herein on or about February 3rd, 2023, and defendant's second supplemental request for discovery filed herein on or about March 24th. Now, number 1, now I'm just going to say this really quick because I did mention this last night. Okay, in our conversation, one of the main ones, the first one, his request in order for he requests an order for the state to disclose the following items included in the defendant's first supplemental request for discovery. Actually, let me blow this up a little bit more. That's kind of tiny. I'm sorry, guys. Let's see, that might be a little bit better. Okay, so moving on. It says request number 43. This is what I said yesterday, guys, last night. Feels good, all right, to be right sometimes. All body cam and dash cam footage from officers involved in search and arrest of BK in Pennsylvania. Okay, as of May 4th, 2023, May 4th, 2023, counsel for BK has not received the requested materials. So, and that's just number 1. They're asking for very simple. You're telling me you got all those guys, SWAT, FBI, local PD, etc., all banding together to get this bad guy considered armed and extremely dangerous, right? And not one of them has their body cam on. Not one of them is set record. Now, I know you and I have discussed that in great detail before. It seems a bit odd that none of them have footage. Mm-hmm. Not one.
Yeah, apparently not one.
That's a bit weird, right?
Seems weird to me. Seems very weird to me with all of the different law enforcement agencies that were involved in this operation. Different organizations are going to have different policies, different equipment, and so forth. So, you know, I don't know at this point, like, what the Pennsylvania State Police has versus what the local county people have versus what the FBI have. But body cams are pretty ubiquitous at this point. And so, you know, for every single one of these agencies to have officers there and not a single one of them is operating a body cam, that to me is just very, very sketch.
I know, right? It just
very
seems,
sketch.
It's very weird. Okay.
Very sketch.
That part doesn't make any sense. So you know where I've been standing for a while. Still part of my soul, still a corner of my heart still says him guilty. Okay, guys? So there's still a part of me that thinks that. All right. And Andrea, I'm sorry. I that's just where my heart still sits. Okay. I still feel like he has there's some sort of connection here. There's gotta be, right? Maybe he wasn't the one to, do the thing, but maybe he was a part of it in some sort of way. I don't know what it is, but it just still isn't sitting right to think that this guy is going to be able to just walk, possibly, right? But it is strange. If they did anything illegal, if they cut corners, if they did anything outside of the law to get this guy, that can screw up this whole entire case, guys.
It can, and we already have a pretty substantial reason to believe that has happened, and that is the disclaimer that's there in that probable cause affidavit that supported the search warrant in Pullman, Washington, over there in Whitman County. They laid out the DNA evidence and then included this very specific request to the court that I'm telling you all of this, but I'm specifically asking you not to rely on this DNA, because if it gets suppressed, we don't want that to be part of your decision. That could potentially undermine those search warrants that relied on that information that is suppressed. So that is referring to illegal activity. That's not referring to just, the police got a bad tip, or they had some bad information, or maybe even they relied on bad science. Things that are inadmissible for whatever reason don't invalidate a search warrant. Things that are illegal do. So that, from day one, to me, once that, affidavit came out, that has been an enormous red flag, just waiting to find out what the details are of why a prosecuting attorney was so concerned about the police conduct in this case that they felt the need to include that disclaimer.
Like I said, that's the part. These are the parts where I go, the math ain't mathin'. There's a lot of questions here, but moving on. Second part. All right. Number 2, same thing. All right. Defendants first supplemental request for discovery, request number 49. All lab testing, including photographs and color diagrams and bench notes, including but not limited to copies of lab reports detailing the forensic evidence collection and analysis of items recovered at BK's parents' home, trash cans and other receptacles, and BK's Hyundai Elantra. As of May 4th, which is going to be about 2 months ago here soon, guys. We're at the end of the month here. All right. So as of May 4th, counsel for BK has not received the requested materials, and based upon information and beliefs, these reports contain exculpatory information. Okay. So now this is another part that I thought that was very, very interesting as well. Yes. Obviously, they're wanting to see the proof of how they got the proof. Yes. They want to see the journey.
Yes.
And how they got the information to get Bryan Kohberger locked up in the first place. That's all they want. But what's interesting is that the state has not produced that proof. Again, seems a bit strange and odd. And again, yes, Shay, okay? Yeah, blowing it, literally, okay? For lack of a better term, okay? It feels like if he really is let's just say he is the guy, and he did a really great job cleaning up his stuff, okay? Thorough as hell. There
would be evidence of that. But we can move on.
No, for sure. No, absolutely. Oh, I know. Even if he bleached and then took it over with Windex, using the newspapers and to wipe everything down and all that stuff, and it got all the streaks out and all that stuff. Okay, but I'm just saying, if he was that brilliant, okay, if he really was that like a ninja with cleaning, okay,
yes.
They still need to show proof on how they got him. They still need to show the journey in which they got him, period, point blank. And they haven't done that. And so that is another big, huge red flag of a problem. And let me say this too. A lot of cases lose in this situation. We see this countless times where we see law enforcement not do their due diligence, or they plant evidence to get the person. There's been plenty of guys on that have been exonerated or who have been on death row that were later on exonerated because of stuff being planted, because they just wanted to get their guy. Mm-hmm. And remember, a lot of us, even including myself, were constantly getting frustrated whenever we were watching these press conferences, listening to Moscow PD going, we're playing this close to the vest, we're doing this close to the vest, oh, we can't talk about that, being completely left in the dark, frustrated as hell, understandably, because we thought that, and I feel like the general public felt like Moscow wasn't doing their due diligence, wasn't doing the work, and then suddenly uproots out of nowhere Bryan Kohberger, and now he is our main focus and obsession now. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they are not willing to give, that they're dragging their feet to give evidence and proof on how they got their proof, mm-hmm. screams foul play in my head.
Well, it definitely raises some questions about that for sure. Now, I do want to point out that most of these issues that were raised in the motion to compel, they also apparently had been resolved before the hearing went forward. So there were only a few specific requests, items requested that the defense continued to say we need an order for this. And Ann Taylor made a point on more than one occasion of making it clear she's not accusing the prosecutor of any kind of wrongdoing here. She's not saying he's deliberately trying to hide the ball or anything like that. They appear to be able to work extremely well together. They have a good collegial relationship. They're able to reach agreement on quite a few things. So I have no beef with Mr. Thompson in that regard myself. From my perspective in this general area of the world, he's a pretty good prosecutor for a defense attorney to want to be able to work with. But they also both made it clear that it looks like the problem here is the FBI. The problem is the FBI is dragging their feet, not finalizing reports, not handing things over in a timely fashion. And so the real motivation behind this was to get a date certain so that they could inform the FBI that this is when you need to get it done. Like, you're not running the show here. We're running the show here. You need to hand this stuff over so that he can prepare his defense.
Exactly. And I do want to point out, because I forgot there was a 2A to this as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. So request 49. But they said all lab testing, including, photographs, color diagrams, and bench notes, including but not limited to ISP and FBI forensic lab reports, including but not limited to lab reports 11 and 25. Now, one thing I'm very curious about is what the hell is reports 11 and 25? That's what I'd like to know. And why are they so important?
It's common when you have a big case like this that when you submit it to the lab, there's a massive amount of testing that is done. And so they organize their reports numerically, right? Because they're going to be testing, samples from, the victims, like under the fingernails and stuff like that. There's going to be swabs for that. They're going to be testing, looking for DNA, looking for biological fluids, that type of thing. They're going to be swabbing the victims' bodies, for the same thing. Just a massive amount of evidence that is going over to this lab to be processed. So in order to try to, make sense out of it, keep it in some sort of order, they'll tend to order these reports. And so what that particular request tells me is that obviously the defense has received some, they haven't received all. So either, these things are just not there. They can tell, like, we've received 10 and we've received 12, but there's no 11 anywhere. Or report number 11 has been referenced somewhere else. It's been referenced in a police report. It's been referenced in one of the other lab reports or something like that, so that they know that it exists and is out there to be requested. But on this motion to compel, the only request that went forward today in this hearing is the request number 6 for the training records of the officers. And so what that indicates is that all of these other requests, they have been able to work that out. They have either identified that there is no such discovery to be produced, or yes, they have it and we are producing it to you. Yes, we have it and we'll get it to you by X date. So most of that appears to have been resolved, and it's likely that if that's not already in the defense's possession, then it's probably on the way.
Interesting. Yeah, I there's it's so weird, all of this. It just it's frustrating. It's just so frustrating. Yeah, could just consume, you know what I mean? Consuming all this, everybody. I mean, let me be real. I mean, not only just myself. There's been so many other content creators that have been talking about this at nauseum. Some more than others.
Mm-hmm.
But it has gotten to the place where now it seems as if everyone might have to delete everything and start from ground zero all over again.
Start over. And it's going to be very hard to do that, Pascal. I mean, not to call you out, but it's a good example of how hard it is to let go of once you have kind of developed that gut reaction, that belief. I think he's probably guilty. It's really, really difficult to make that turn. And so that's kind of the tragedy that as a defense attorney I deal with and I focus on is how these accusations are life-changing. Even if you go through the process and you end up being vindicated, you will never get your old life back.
Yeah. And you're right. You're right. It's but it is frustrating because because I just still feel in my bones. There's some sort of connection. There's got to be, but there's some sort of connection because it just doesn't make sense that they just pick some random guy like a needle in a haystack in a way. Some random guy out of nowhere to pick and say that he is the guy. It just seems a bit odd. And then also the profiling of this guy. You really sat down and took all that time to profile this guy and go, he's the perfect scapegoat. He is the perfect fall guy for this whole entire tragedy. It just seems a bit of a stretch. Now, when it comes to what 5-0 may have or may not have done, let's just say that because everything's alleged right now. What they may or may not have done is wrong and is very, very bad. And can screw up the case. Hence the reason why I see the state really dragging their feet on giving them proof. But that doesn't automatically, like I keep saying, it does not automatically prove this man's innocence. And I know I'm repeating myself again, but I'm just saying that out loud because it just seems so odd that they would pick one guy named Bryan Kohberger and this whole profile of who this guy is and how he is and how he presents himself. How would they pick him out of the millions of people that live, hundreds of people, thousands of people that live in the Moscow, Idaho area? It just seems very strange.
If we assume just for a second, hypothetically, put everything aside, we assume that Bryan Kohberger is innocent. He did not do this. There's a lot of different explanations for how we got to where we are today. One of them is certainly the possibility that he's framed by law enforcement, or he's framed by the actual perpetrator, somebody who would be there in a position to place this knife sheath under the body where it will be found with this DNA to cast suspicion on him. These are possibilities, but another possibility is that this is just inadvertent. This is the type of mistake that often happens when you have crime scenes. Things can get contaminated. It's just the way that it is. If he has ever been in this house, there is a possibility that his DNA is in there. And if you touch something that his DNA is on and then touch this knife sheath, you can very easily transfer DNA from one object to another object without him ever being in contact with that knife sheath. So my view of what is probably the most likely scenario here, at least based on what we know at this time, I think that's probably the likely scenario. Police focused on him because, DNA on a button of a knife sheath, that sounds like pretty good evidence.
Right.
But the problem is that can really unravel it. And like we said, standing alone, it doesn't tell you very much. But if they were right, if they had been able to corroborate it with all of this other information, well, now you look like geniuses. Of course you went down the right road. But mistakes can happen. Inadvertently, these things can come about just because we have this we have this impression that DNA evidence is very solid, that it's much stronger than other types of evidence, very definitive. And that's really not the case. That's something that I think I maybe appreciate, as a defense attorney who's worked on these issues, probably a little bit more than the lay public does. DNA is extremely easily transferred. I have DNA. Well, this is my office, so this isn't a very good example. But I did an interview this morning with Morgan Romero, one of the local Boise news reporters, and just used as the example. Just by standing here talking to you, you're probably, if you went and swabbed your camera over there that I have never touched, you're probably still going to get my DNA off of it. We have, this process of just kind of constantly emitting, DNA and cells and sweats and all of that type of thing. And we are finding now that it is deposited very widely. And the sensitivity that the instruments now have to be able to detect DNA are picking things up that are, much more minute particles and stuff than, 20 years ago. So we're picking up a lot more of this touch DNA and stuff like that looks like good evidence at first glance. But once you really get into it, it turns out that it may not be. A really good example of this, a lot of people have brought up this case in the last few days, is the case of Lucas Anderson. It's very worth looking at if it's not one that you've heard of. It's Lucas, spelled Lukis. But this is a case where a gentleman was charged with capital murder. He was facing the death penalty because his DNA was found on the fingernails of the victim of this murder. And it later turned out he was able to prove he did, in fact, have a rock solid alibi. He had been in the hospital at that time. And they were able to trace back and figure out his DNA got on the fingernails of the dead guy because the same paramedics that had responded to him earlier in the day then later went and recovered the body from this crime scene. So there was this inadvertent transfer of DNA, led to him being under suspicion and charged. So that type of thing does happen. We know that it happens. We don't know how frequently it happens. But, one person going to the firing squad, when they shouldn't is one too many for my liking.
So then the only pushback I'll have on this part, because when they say that what the defense is claiming now, that there was two other sets of DNA, male DNA, this is now is a compound question now, because I'm wondering what kind of DNA, like what was it? You know what I mean? Was it skin cells? Was it another touch DNA type of situation? So I have that question. But the other part is, you got to understand, there's also that was also a party house. Many men have gone in and out of that place. Many young men have gone in and out of that place. So there's probably DNA all over that mug of men's DNA or touch DNA throughout the entire house. So it does that. So that's the only pushback I would say in regards to it too, which is if they found touch DNA, and if we're saying the possibility is that his DNA must have just like some semblance of his DNA rubbed off on the knife sheath in some sort of way, or so on and so forth, then my argument would be like, but there's so many other DNA in that house then too. So then every male should be a suspect if there is male DNA, more than just one male DNA being found in that crime scene.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And the noise, the messiness of the crime scene was always going to be an issue, given the fact that this was a party house. It does make it very, very difficult to rule out, who is who. I certainly understand why the police would prioritize, we're going to focus on this DNA that we found on the knife sheath, as opposed to, we don't know where they found this other DNA. Did they find it in the bathroom? Did they find it in the victim's rooms? I mean, we don't know. Those would raise very different questions. But, if it's random DNA from the kitchen that just happens to be unidentified, I can understand why the police aren't going to prioritize that. It's a party house. It doesn't necessarily link you with a murder. if they had found it, on the bedspread near one of the victims, that might raise a different question. Why
Right.
did we not choose to pursue this and go further down that road?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I will say, on the other side of the fence, more on the side of possible innocence. I mean, he's been known for being tough on students, or being a certain type of way with students, so on and so forth. So maybe he has some enemies. I
Yeah.
don't know, because they tested the knife in one place, found nothing. They took it to someplace else, and that's where they found the touch DNA.
Mhm.
That is also a bit odd. I mean, when you start playing when you start playing the record backwards, it does seem a bit odd. But again, just showing you guys really quick. The third one, all notes, recordings, all from all officers from Moscow Police Department, which would be very interesting to hear, I'm sure. His counsel has not received any of those recordings as of May 4th. Okay, since they requested for that information, they have not received any of the notes, recordings, or anything from any of the officers from Moscow, from the Moscow Police Department. There's also all reports, that is audio, video evidence, and any recorded statements related to BK's arrest and incarceration in Pennsylvania, which I think would be a very big piece of information as well. I mean, that kind of goes back to the body cam footage as well. Everything all the way down to if they were interrogating him and body cam or security cameras rolling or anything of that sort. If they were videotaping him, anything of that. If they have that stuff, I think that would be very important to have for this situation. Then, of course, there's the fifth and sixth, which one, it says all reports and notes and recordings and photos. Another one, of course, training records. And this is the one that I thought was very interesting, because I was trying to play that clip for you guys, but for some odd reason, the internets is being a damn fool right now. Okay. And I will get to that super chat in just a minute, Jeff H. I promise you. But this part I thought was very interesting. Training records of specific officers.
Yes.
Okay. She in the trial, she literally does say out loud. Okay. I'm not going to play it because it's going to be glitchy and all that. But she did ask out loud, and you were there in the courtroom. She was asking specifically for three, if I'm correct, three officers' names. She was very specific on who they were, and she wanted training records of these individuals. Now, I want to also add on top of this, or add to the end of this tail end, that she's also known for exploiting or exposing, corrupt cops. She's actually really good at it. And I feel that she's actually trying to do that same approach all over again. What are your thoughts on that, Andrea?
Well, what this motion says to me, this request says to me, is that she has seen choices that these police officers made that she does not agree with, that she thinks are problematic. And so she spelled out some of the decisions that they had made that led her to make this request for these training records, interrogation decisions, decisions about evidence collection, what tips to follow up on, what tips to not follow up on, all that type of thing. And so, yeah, if she wants the training records, it's because she wants to see if there is an explanation for why they made the decision they did that's based on what they were told to do as part of ordinary process. For example, with the interrogation, all three of these officers had conducted some interrogations or interviews of different witnesses. My suspicion, if I were going to guess, is that she's looking for evidence of training in what's known as the Reed method. The Reed method is a old method of police interrogation. I guess some folks probably do still use it, but it's come very much into disrepute because over the last decade or so, there's been studies that have tended to show that this will produce more false confessions than should be tolerable in a free society. It's a very manipulative type of strategy to get information from people. And so, in fact, commonly now the Reed technique is taught as a way of how to not do things, how to not taint your interview. Don't do it this way. But so that was a very common method for cops who were trained, 10, 15, 20 years ago to be taught how to conduct these interrogations. If she has seen questioning that appears to follow this method, yeah, I suspect she's going to want to look and see, is that your background? Is that what he was trained? Because that, under what we know today about this type of questioning, could be a real problem.
Interesting. So another, like, crack, finding another crack in the
yes,
in the case, or in this situation, how they interrogated him, how they approached him, if it was not up to new standards or new ways, it could throw everything out the window too.
If it's suggestive or it's manipulative or it puts pressure on them in a way that is basically, it's set up to be coercive, to put people in a situation where they are manipulated to feel that they have to give information to the police. And the problem arises when that is then driven by the outcome, that the cop wants. The cop is looking for a specific answer. That's typically, going to be clear to the person being questioned what the cop is trying to get you to say. And so at some point you just, for a variety of reasons, will tell the officer what they're looking for. And that's a theme you see throughout. Like, if you go through the cases for the Innocence Project, the false confessions are an enormous proportion of the cases where people are subsequently exonerated. It's hard to believe, I think hard for a lot of people to believe that people will very readily, a lot of the times, make up completely false things about themselves, implicate themselves in criminal activity. And it just speaks to the power these methods have to be able to get inside people's minds and convince them in the moment that that's the right thing to do.
Interesting. So, the power of manipulation, or the power of knowing how to bend words to make it sound like they're, admitting to guilt, unbeknownst to them. Oh, they don't know, but they're saying it. Or you are interrogating them to the point of exhaustion, to the point where they mentally break, saying, I will say whatever you want,
or
so
to the
I can
point,
get out of this room,
or to the point where they have now been so gaslit and they are so confused, they don't know what's real and what's not real. They are willing to accept the police officer's version of events as what happens, because they no longer have certainty in their own perception of what happened.
Yeah, because I do have a question here. Two different questions. One is a super chat, but so I'm going to get to this really quick. It goes back to what we were just talking about with the labs and everything. So Jeff H, thank you so much for the 5. Do certain labs have limitations that others don't? That's actually a very, very good question. Thank you, Jeff H, for the super chat.
Yeah, very much. I mean, certain techniques, you're going to need, specialized labs that will have the equipment and training, the expertise to be able to do that type of thing. The genetic genealogy, for example, this requires development of a very specific type of DNA profile. It's not the type of DNA profiling that is used for identification purposes in law enforcement. So it's not something that law enforcement, related labs are equipped to be able to do. So they have to go to a specialty lab to be able to develop that type of profile to do the genetic profiling.
Gotcha. I got another one. And I know you did kind of discuss this a second ago, but I just wanted to see if you could maybe expand, if you don't mind. Roberta on Facebook, thank you so much for the comment on Facebook. She also said, she said, hi, y'all. What was the read technique? Can you give an example? And can I add on top of that, can you explain to us why it's not being used anymore?
Yeah, so the read technique, it's spelled R-E-I-D, read technique. You can look it up online. It's just named after the guy that developed this technique. I might have been FBI, don't remember 100% for sure on that. Sure. But anyway, it's just, yes, a variety of methods that are pitched as, these are ways to get information from people, to build rapport with them, and to, get them manipulated to the point where they will want to provide information. And so it can consist of things like very commonplace to lie to the suspect about the type of evidence you have. You go into an interrogation and the cop will tell you, we have you on video. They don't have you on video. You know they don't have you on video because you weren't there. So you deny, no, I wasn't on video. And the cop will wear you down. I know, we have it here. We know you're on video. If you don't tell us, now is your time to tell us, okay? If you don't tell us now, things are going to go very badly for you if you go to the prosecutor. But if you give me this information now, I can put in a good word for you and things won't go so badly. That's how the Reed technique works.
Interesting. So in other words, things that you see in the movies a lot of times where if there's two people who get arrested and they separate them to interrogate both of them, they'll go into the other room being like, listen, your partner is outing you right now. You might as well speak up before before things get worse. He's throwing you under the bus, son. So what are you going to say? He's told us everything.
He's told us everything. So you might as well tell us. Yeah. In fact, I mean, I've read thousands of police reports, right? And I would have to say, I think it's probably more common for police to lie in an interrogation than to be completely honest and to just tell the truth. It is such a common technique for them to use, and it's very problematic for these reasons.
So it's still being used, right? Mm-hmm. It's still being used as we speak today.
Yes. So yeah. It's been very discounted in a lot of forums, and it's very challengeable now for all of these reasons. But it has not been found to be like inadmissible in court or anything like that. It's a situation where it's become so accepted and normal that it's just sort of routinely let in, and the burden ends up being on the defense for practical purposes to bring in your own expert to explain the problems with this technique, and then just hope that the jury is paying attention and cares about the information that you're providing them, for why it may not be a valid information that the cop got.
Right. Okay. So you're telling me that, so that I understand this. The Reed technique is still being used to this day.
Yes.
Now, is it being used throughout, like, nationally still, or is it only like outlawed, or is there a new technique that they have been implementing? Because you got to remember, Taylor, his attorney has been asking for 3 names right now, and they're basically their training or their track records, right? Mm-hmm. So it does make you wonder. Mm-hmm. Were they using, as you said, were they using the Reed technique? Are they not allowed to use the Reed technique on Bryan Kohberger? If they're using it everywhere else, why can't they use it there?
Oh, they would be allowed. It would be allowed. But again, it's a hole for the defense to be able to point out, to say, this is a piece of information. Let's say that they went and interviewed, let's go to kind of the example that everybody, I think, has some concerns about, and that's the timeline. The timeline came from the interviews with the surviving roommates. What techniques did the police officers use to conduct those interviews? Because those techniques are critical, because not just for all of these reasons that we've talked about, but it is extremely easy with a person, if they are even in a traumatic state, to misremember things, or to have things suggested to them that they will literally incorporate into their own memory and later believe to be true, to have their memory tainted by stuff. So all of these aspects of the investigation are really critically important. If the defense has seen something that they think raises a red flag, they want to know why. They want to know why and how did this happen? And so if officers were trained in these specific techniques, it's not going to make it inadmissible. It's not like she's not going to go and ask the court to not let these officers testify or anything like that. But it's going to be something that she's going to be able to bring up in cross-examination and potentially present her own defense expert on, to be able to explain, you got this information using this technique. This technique is known to produce unreliable results, but you're telling the jury that they should ignore that and put their full weight on this result that you got from this flawed technique.
Okay. Now I see it. Okay. Now I see it for sure. But it does make you wonder, what was he saying? Mm-hmm. What were they saying to Bryan Kohberger to make him say whatever he said during the interrogations, or what he's claiming to have said during the interrogation? Because why would they want that footage? Obviously, they would want that footage no matter what, just so they have a full scope of what's going on with their client. but it does make you wonder why they're specifically asking for those things.
Yeah.
But then on top of it, I can't help but say this too, is that why would they even ask for it? If you get what I'm saying, doesn't make any sense. You'd think that there would be complete transparency on Moscow PD side, on Pennsylvania, the Alberts, I forgot the name of the town he was arrested in, his hometown.
Albright or something.
Albrightsville.
Yeah.
Albrightsville.
Yeah.
Albrightsville PD footage, all that stuff should already be there for them to consume and watch with their own two eyes. They should, in my personal opinion, obviously I'm not the lawyer, but I would assume that would be typically in the package that they're asking for, in the documents, and within the 51 terabytes of footage and all that stuff. They don't have any of that. That seems a bit odd, right?
So training materials are not going to be a default production. They're going to be something that generally you're going to have to ask for specifically, and that as well. Ann Taylor made a point of pointing out that there's over 100, like 130 officers or something like that on this case. She's asking just for three records. So this is not a broad fishing expedition to go over everyone who touched the case with a fine-tooth comb. She has very specific reasons based on what we can infer is conduct on the part of these officers that calls into question, why did they do that? Is that how you were trained to do it? Because if they acted either in accordance with a training method that's bad, like the Reed method, or if they acted outside of what their training would have told them to do, then those are problems that she's going to be able to point out.
Interesting. Now, I do want to ask you then, because obviously all the breadcrumbs and whatnot, are all going down the side of corruption. In my thoughts, that there's some sort of corruption going on. That there's some corruption going on. That does not mean he's innocent, but it means that there are some corners that were cut. Okay. They cut some corners and they broke some laws. Okay. Or they did things that were not ethical at all and could really screw up this trial and this case. You think that that's what they're basically alluding to, that they should be letting him walk because of what they're requesting right now?
What they're pointing out is that from the defense perspective, this is a flawed investigation. The reason why it's a flawed investigation from the defense perspective is, of course, from the defense perspective, Bryan Kohberger is innocent. So an investigation that led to him being charged with this crime clearly had some problems with it. That's their view. Now, as we've said, they may have some support for that because of what is looking like the thinness of the state's case at this point. But so that is going to be an important part of the story that they're going to need to be able to explain to the jury, because they're going to want to know, just like you, well, then why Bryan Kohberger? Why did this get focused on him? And so the more they're able to point out decisions along the way that led to this outcome that were problematic, the easier it's going to be able to demonstrate to the jury at any of these points it could have gone a different way if they had done it the way that they're supposed to, if they had not relied on this bad information that they got from the Reed technique, et cetera, then we wouldn't have ended up here. Interesting.
Okay. That's very, very true. We would not be asking, there would not be this motion to compel discovery. There would not be this conversation at all, because they would just already have, if they asked for those things would have already been given to them. It would already be in their possession. There would not need to be a motion for these things, for discovery. Now, the other thing though, too, which is interesting, because you were in the room. Okay. Did he, and what's interesting about this is that, there were supposed to be 4 motions. There were supposed to be 4 hearings, or they were supposed to talk about 4 different things, and they only talked about one.
Yes.
Why?
Well, so we don't know 100% for sure, except for one of them. The motion that the state had filed asking for the protective order on the genetic genealogy. It turns out that because the defense had filed their opposition late in the week, it was either Thursday or Friday, and they included some factual support for their motion, some declarations from experts and things like that. That is, the state can't fairly be expected to just turn around, over the weekend and come in on Tuesday and have a response to that. So the state filed a response asking for more time to be able to respond to what the defense has presented. The defense didn't object to that. So that hearing is going to be continued. It will happen at some point. We don't know when yet.
Right.
But as far as we know at this point, there will be a future court hearing to deal with that. It's just going to take a little bit more time.
A little bit
The
more
other
time.
two were the motion dealing with the request to stay the process while the grand jury materials are being compiled and provided. That did not go forward. And likewise, the motion that the defense had made asking for more time to be able to provide their alibi disclosures, the disclosures of the nature of the alibi and any witnesses in support of an alibi, if that's a defense they intend to offer at trial. The state hadn't objected to that either, so that was agreed and likely taken off calendar for that reason. So I assume that with the grand jury motion as well, they were just able to resolve it. They were able to come to an agreement behind the scenes that they could both live with. And so there was no need to go to court and ask for a ruling on it.
Okay. But, obviously the main one I feel that everyone is mainly interested in is the DNA stuff.
Yes.
Is the evidence of DNA or evidence of getting said DNA, how they got it, why did they get it? And
when did they get it? When did they focus on Bryan Kohberger is a big question here.
And when will they get proof of the proof, right?
Yeah.
Evidence of how they got the evidence. When are we going to, or when is the defense actually going to lay their eyes on the situation and on the paperwork as well? And now we're hearing, from my understanding, the state is going to get it to them. What's going on with that?
The state is still very much resisting. No, the state is still very much resisting being required to hand over the genetic genealogy information. Their position is that it's not relevant because they're not going to use it at trial. That it implicates the privacy rights of everybody who potentially contributed their DNA into one of these databases. That those people are tipsters, under the law and entitled to protection. There may be some intellectual property, trade secret types of issues that are implicated as well. So the state does not want to hand any of this over, and it does not appear that they are changing in that position. It's just that part of the defendant's justification for saying we believe we're entitled to this included an evidentiary proffer. They provided evidence to the court. And so it is only fair for the state to have an opportunity to evaluate that evidence and see if they have got a counterpoint to be able to present.
But they're still dragging their feet. State is still dragging their feet on this whole situation, on the paperwork, on showing proof of how they got this stuff. And I get it, the concern of exposing their tipsters, I guess. I'm just using one of your words. But I feel like we're beyond that now. And I feel that they are going to be protected no matter what. I mean, sure, the defense will know, but it's not like that kind of information. I would assume that information would not be public record. I'm assuming. But
yeah, I mean, it would depending on how it goes, it could come out at trial. We don't really know. Now, I will say that typically with this type of research, this isn't a situation where like some random third party's DNA is not suddenly going to become available to the defense. Like that's not how these processes go. What happens is the profile gets submitted into the database, and then potential relatives are identified, and they're able to get a sense of like the degree of closeness. Is this somebody who is so close genetically that it's probably a sibling, a very close relative, or is it more like a cousin or maybe even a second cousin if it's very remote? So there's a lot of subjectivity that is built into that process, a lot of decision making that happens for people to make these kinds of judgment calls, a lot of reliance on biographical records that may or may not be good. If you're relying on formal, birth and marriage and death certificates and stuff like that, okay, that's often all right, but also often those records are incomplete or the reality is inconsistent with them. Like just because a birth certificate says who the father is doesn't mean always that that's actually who the father is.
Now you're pulling out some more Povich stuff now. Hold up.
I am pulling out a little more Povich stuff.
Time out.
Okay.
Whoa. But
that's the thing is with the validity of this type of genealogical research, you're depending on that is the daddy. Okay. If the birth certificate says so, it needs to be, because they're not going to necessarily have a way to pick up a problem there. So that there are lots of ways like that where inaccuracy, or problems can be introduced into that building of that genetic profile. I personally tend to think a lot of those types of questions are probably moot in this case, because as we have learned, they have corroborated the DNA on the knife sheath with a swab directly from Bryan Kohberger using the standard STR identification technology. I don't know that the defense is going to really firmly contest at this point that DNA on the knife sheath is his, but it still raises the questions about how did it get there, and why did the police, why and when did the police choose to focus on him? Because that just goes to the weight of whether this was corroborating information that came into their possession, or this is them going out and using their confirmation bias, looking for things that will tell them what they want to hear, which is that Bryan Kohberger did it.
Okay. Well, we got some super chats. Let me get into this really quick. Thomas Roach, thank you so much for the 5. He touched several students' papers. Easy touch DNA / student could have passed it. Mm-hmm. Why no other DNA? Mm-hmm. Good point. That's a good possibility, Thomas. I will say that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, a lot going on with this question. Why no other DNA? There could be, lots of reasons why there's no other DNA. Some people tend to be DNA shutters. Some people tend to not leave nearly as much DNA. I had a case that actually it was interesting. It went to trial a couple of years ago, and I had it on appeal. But there was a stabbing, and it was unclear exactly how it happened. Part of it was captured on video, however. And so you were able to see the knife clearly in the hand of one of the people. But the DNA, the only DNA that was found on the knife handle, belonged to the person who had been killed. So even though you can see with your own eyes it's in this person's hand, that person's DNA was not on the knife handle. So there can be a lot of just confounding things going on with why no other DNA. It could simply be they didn't look everywhere. They can't swab the entire house. So they probably chose, specific areas that they focused on that they thought were going to be significant. Which again, if that is the case, then that raises big questions about, okay, well then these other 2 males, where did that come from? If it didn't come from like the bottom of the dishwasher in the kitchen, where we can easily rule it out as, well, that was probably, the installer or something like that. Where did they get those particular samples from? We have to assume that they were looking for things they thought would be probative evidence and not just any DNA anywhere in the house.
Yeah, I mean, but then at the same time, I still say that what the defense claims as well is that there's two other male DNA in the crime scene. Mm-hmm. Where did they find this? Yeah. What kind of DNA is it? Is it hair? Is it blood? Is it skin cells? Is it anything? Right? Mm-hmm. What could that be if there was two other DNA going on, and how did they find that? That's the other piece too, because if there's touch DNA, but if you actually have skin cells that you have, or blood of another male, I mean, I feel like they should be looking in that direction. Wouldn't you think?
I would think that if they had found blood,
strange.
that we would know that blood of an unrelated male would be a significant piece of evidence, because of the
Right.
likelihood that somebody committing a quadruple stabbing, would cut themselves in the process.
Absolutely. And then the other thing too is, let's not forget the other two males. Those could have been men that came in, the kids who came in to discover the bodies first and foremost. They could have left things behind there too.
Yes.
That might have been pushed to the side. You see what I'm saying? So
Yep.
there are possibilities here outside of just, what they're claiming, what the defense is claiming. There are some things that could be explained as possibilities.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying. I got a super chat here, another one. Jeff H, thank you so much for the 10. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm pretty sure my neighbor would not think too highly of me putting my trash in his. Okay, hold on. We're gonna talk about that, baby. Jeff, I love you. But maybe if I explained there's none of my DNA in any of it, scratching my head. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff, for asking that question. Yeah, baby. We got to talk about that, because I was going to talk about that, and then I forgot about it until Jeff just did it. Love how things work out. Now, let's talk about this. If you are guilty of doing anything, of doing said terrible thing, let's forget the surgical gloves, wearing the surgical gloves everywhere. Let's forget bleaching and cleaning. Well, we don't know if he was, we hear that he was bleaching and cleaning his car thoroughly. Let's forget the fact that when the cops allegedly went in, he was found Ziploc bagging his own waste, and he was wearing surgical gloves. Let's throw all those things out the window really quick. Let's forget all those details. And let's talk about that one thing. They said, as they were surveilling him, as they were watching him, he was putting out trash and putting his trash in other people's trash cans, in neighbors' trash cans. If you ain't guilty, if you didn't do nothing, if you weren't part of some heinous crime, why would you throw trash in another neighbor's trash can? I'm just curious.
My response to this, Pascal, is that every single example that you have given here is uncorroborated, anonymous source information that has been provided to the media in violation of the gag order. Most of that type of information has now turned out to be completely untrue. For example, it was widely reported that there was some like Instagram messaging between Mr. Kohberger and one of the victims. There was wide reporting that he was found in possession of the IDs of the victims. None of this has turned out to be true. So I would simply urge a lot of skepticism with these reports, particularly these anonymously sourced, these unattributed pieces of information that would violate the gag order if that person, is associated with law enforcement. They're not credible. They have not been tested. They have not been presented in court. They have not been acknowledged as any part of the legal process at all. And so I am not, frankly, going to believe a single one of those until I see it in court.
Gotcha. Okay, because I do think if I now I want to pull up the probable cause affidavit. I could have sworn there was reports in there, but I could be wrong. This is all off memory, but it does make you think that if that information, if those allegations are actually true, then I guess that's the only argument that I have.
That's
there.
The question, yeah. And that's, what I mean? That's the whole point. I would point out at the gag order hearing, when Judge spoke about the need for the gag order, he very specifically said there has been misinformation and disinformation about this case. He used both of those words. And again, lawyers are very careful with their language. There is a distinction here. Misinformation is, I accidentally told you the wrong thing. It happened. It was inadvertent. Disinformation is, I did it deliberately. I am purposefully feeding out to you a false narrative. For judge to use that term disinformation, suggests to me that he is concerned about the possibility that, yeah, the press is being seeded with this information to create a narrative so that nobody is willing to question the possibility that Bryan Kohberger could be innocent. He's been nailed down as some type of incel without any real substantiation of that either. He's been characterized, in all of these kind of bizarre ways. All of these actions that have been attributed to him by these anonymous sources, none of that appears to be panning out. So I just encourage an awful lot of skepticism when engaging with these types of stories in the media. This type of anonymous reporting, it simply is not reliable, and it's just very suspicious under all of these circumstances.
Interesting. Okay. Now I do understand. I mean, we have to look at both sides and look at things as alleged, right? Just as alleged, these claims, etc. But it does, again,
I would argue that those claims have not even reached the standard of being alleged. The state has not alleged them. The state has not alleged them. They have not presented evidence of that. Now, yes, granted, we have a gag order. We have limited information. We're not privy to discovery and so forth. But, alleged, who alleged it? Was this somebody that was standing at the water cooler that was your source that said, I read something on Reddit and I'm going to tell you about it, and now you're going to go report it as national news? When you have an anonymous source, there's no quality control over things like that. So you have no idea if this is an actual cop from the Albrightsville PD or the law, the FBI or something like that, or if this is something I chatted with my dog about before I got on camera, and pulled essentially out of thin air.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I do know that there is, of course there's documents, and I know you're saying like the misinformation, disinformation, and all that. And I guess what's frustrating, I think, for a lot of us that are trying to get our heads straight on this whole thing is what is the information and what isn't the information. I remember that there, just a few days ago when the documents did drop, there was, if I'm correct, there was some sort of misprint or mistake in the documents, and then the world just imploded on it, going, oh my God. And of course, when you got information going out like that, you got to make sure every lowercase j is dotted and every T is crossed before you send out that information, especially when you have people like myself and so many others that are, like we all are, right, chomping at the bit to hear that new exclusive information, right? Because you could put one word in the middle of a sentence and it can change the whole perspective of that sentence or of that document, and that can screw things up as well. So I think it's tough.
It's very tough.
When you're getting the information, when you're getting information, you're fighting for the true information, and you can't really get it fully 110% because of there's so much static within this information superhighway. You were going to say,
and that's part of what's so disturbing from my perspective about this media environment that we're in. Maybe this case is just really highlighting it. Maybe it's unique to this case. I don't really know, but the problem is that, yes, there is a massive public hunger for information about this case. Everybody wants to know, why did this happen? How did this happen? Who did this? Anything that we can learn that can help us to figure that out. This is a very normal human thing to want to be able to explain so that we can resolve this horrible crime and kind of put it away in our minds. Okay, we understand it. We can make sense out of it now. And so the eagerness of certain actors in the media to exploit that, to distort that, to feed in information that is clearly false, that appears to be in furtherance of a narrative that is very damaging to Mr. Kohberger's right to a fair trial. This is just very disturbing to me from an institution that historically we have had to trust. We've had to trust the media, to give us information about stuff. And they're just increasingly, unfortunately, too many of them exposing themselves as completely undeserving of that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. 100%. 100%. Real quick. Super chat. Thank you so much, Jeff H. The probable cause of the PCA released Thursday. I guess he's quoting this from the New York Post. Okay, we got to be very careful with the New York Post, but I hear what you're saying here. The PCA released Thursday claimed he had been identified through DNA of his father retrieved from his family's garbage on December 27th, despite it being placed in neighbors' trash cans. Now, I'm literally looking at the probable cause affidavit right now as we speak, because I wanted to make sure I'm not losing my mind. And that I'm,
and
that
that's not what it says.
And it's not what it says.
That's not what it says.
And I'm going to show it to you guys really quick, because it's not what it says here. It says at the very end, hold on, let me blow this up because it's very tiny writing. Okay. So this December 27th, they recovered trash from the Kohberger's family residence located in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the or the Idaho State Lab for testing. Okay. Then they reported that the DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of suspect profile. Now, moving on. Based on the information I'm requesting, this is obviously, but they said at least 99.99998% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father. So this is the information that they have here. Mm-hmm. And it does not say in the probable cause affidavit that it was recovered from a neighbor's trash can. I mean, I went through this whole thing while we were just talking, just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. And it doesn't say, I don't see anything in here. Of course, this is me just perusing through this very, very quickly, but I don't see it being said about trash can, neighbor's trash can. This is where they got it, or that they were watching him and he put trash in his, or
that they watched him bleach his car. None of that information is here.
None
of it is in here. And it would be here. That is evidence of consciousness of guilt. With a circumstantial case, you need every little brick you can to be able to build it up. If they had that type of evidence, it would be in here.
Yeah, I feel like it would be. They definitely would have said that in the PCA. I think, at least I think.
Yes, I think so.
But we don't, and they didn't have it in there. And of course, you got to remember there are things that are redacted from the actual probable cause affidavit, but at the same time, I feel like that would be a piece of information that they wouldn't hold back from. They would just say, hey, here he was walking across the street, putting trash in the trash can. Now, I remember reading it. I remember reporting it. I remember talking about it at great lengths, but it was not from the actual probable cause affidavit. Of course, again, as Andrea said, and I do agree, there's a lot that has been taken and ran with, expanded. There's a lot of things that have been hearsay, a lot of things that have been just rumor, or a source is giving out this information. A lot of it has not held up. So it is kind of frustrating when you hear that type of information, especially when you're relying on specific types of news shows or periodicals that you guys read every day.
And what concerns me,
that was being put out there.
And what concerns me, Pascal, as the defense attorney, is that these mistakes are all going in one direction. Nobody is reporting mistakes that, Bryan Kohberger did good things, that he did like a philanthropic mission to, to serve in a hospital with injured children or something like that.
Right.
People aren't reporting this type of thing and making those types of factual claims that later turn out to be an error. These are all cutting against Bryan Kohberger. They are all serving to create this, again, just narrative of the inevitability of his conviction, the certainty of his guilt. And it all appears to be contrary to what is emerging through the actual court process.
Yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, it's kind of like we kind of have to sit back and we just got to wait. Unfortunately, that's kind of what happened for me. Even I kind of, because I could still be doing what everybody else and their mama's still doing. Okay, there's a lot of people who are still riding on the coattails of this story or of this case. But I said, hey, you know what? Unless it's like some huge bombshell, unless it's some huge piece of document, unless it has to do with the trial, there's no point in trying to jump in and say anything more, unless they say, yes, the cotton swab matches, like the cotton swab from Bryan Kohberger actually matches the touch DNA that is on the button. It's done. It is, that is his DNA that's on there. It has been confirmed. I'm like, okay, we could talk about that for sure. But as far as like, oh, what were they doing for the past several hours? Why didn't they call it that? Why didn't they call once they found the bodies? Why didn't they do this, this, and this? I mean, we've already exhausted every question under the sun. Yeah. And now everything is getting, and things kind of went off the rails, y'all. It went off the rails and got crazy to the point where you don't know which way is up anymore. You don't know what's the truth and what's fake anymore. And that's what's frustrating about it. That's why I'm like, you know what? Paperwork, documents, I'm doing the law tube lane. You know, once they give me something about BK, we gonna talk about it. Yeah. But as far as the hearsay stuff, as far as we hear a source told us, I kind of I've put that sword down because I'm tired of getting lost in the sauce. And then now with this new information from the defense, that's why I said earlier in the show, I am quite vexed because the information that we're now hearing tells or sings a different tune, which it looks like could be extremely beneficial for Kohberger right now, unless the state comes in with some seriously solid evidence. They just need more. At the end of the day, this is what we had. This is the conclusion I came to last night with everybody and in my family chat last night. Basically, the prosecution has a lot of work to do, and they need a lot more evidence to show proof positive that they got their guy. And I said, maybe he's not the only one. That I do still feel that this is their guy. He may not be the only one. He may have been the getaway driver. You never know. I don't know. But we need to see proof. We need more evidence. And the state needs to be extremely transparent. And I mean, the state needs to be transparent with everything. Even the 5-0 in Pennsylvania, all the stuff from the FBI, etc., body cam footage, all those things that they are requesting, they need to be absolutely 110% transparent, because this is going to screw up the entire case.
It is.
Or it's going to exonerate him, period. And if it does, then hey.
Yeah,
we still got possibly a monster on the loose, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing. You would think that, we've had the exclusionary rule in US law for 60 years. You would think at some point law enforcement would learn how to stop kicking these own goals. And yet there just seems to be this sense, and I'm going to go ahead and come out and say it tends to be really common when the FBI in particular is involved. Not that the FBI has done anything in the past, 10 years or so to give us a reason to think that they literally will fabricate evidence in order to prosecute somebody that they've targeted. Okay. But they should know better. But there seems to be this sense of impunity that police can simply do what they want because they expect to get away with it. They expect it will be covered up. They expect it won't be discovered. They expect that everyone down the chain will lie about it. They expect the defense will never find out. They expect if the defense does find out that the judge will uphold it anyway. So there is just really very little in the way of checks on those types of law enforcement abuses. It's not supposed to be that way. If the system is working the way that the principles tell us it's supposed to work, those problems should have been solved 60 years ago when we decided that, if police do illegal things, then the evidence they obtain from that is going to be excluded. That would have created an incentive for them not to do those illegal things. That hasn't worked. Police are still abundantly doing illegal things. We see it all the time. And that's an enormous cause for concern about just the legitimacy of our system as a whole.
And you got to remember too, everyone, and I'm sure because I just said it earlier, but you also got an attorney, defense attorney, that's good at exposing corrupt cops, is good at exposing corruption in the system. And that's exactly what I feel. That's exactly what she's trying to do right now. At least that's what I'm feeling in my bones. I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling that in my bones, where she is trying to expose some ish right now that could help. That could help extremely. It could extremely help. That's what I'm trying to say. Why am I trying to sound like Yoda? It would extremely help Bryan Kohberger at the end of the day. This is you weren't joking, Andrea, with your video when you said bombshell, and you said I'm not into that tabloidy crap, but this is a bombshell. And but like you said too, they have to prove all this stuff in court too. But they both have to. Both sides have got to show proof positive their arguments to a T, to a jury. Now, one thing I do want to point out, somebody did say this. I got to find it. Dang, hold on. It's in here somewhere. Hold on. Now, one, I will say this. Yeah. Somebody also said they are looking at the DP as well. They're looking at capital punishment now.
Yes, exactly.
Okay? So he's got a lot to fight for. His life is on the line now. It's not just life behind bars. Now it could be a firing squad, for crying out loud. What are we, Napoleon? But at the same time, some crazy stuff, guys. And some seriously, he's fighting for his life. So of course you got his defense attorney who is just doing her job. She's doing her job, and she's doing what she does best, is exposing corruption. So if she's going to start that and use that as her foundation, I mean, that's a pretty solid foundation to build off of. And
it should be the easiest thing for police to do, to not give her any ammunition. And yet they seem to not be able to manage to do that.
And they're sitting there going, and this is what you said, they're going to get to it. They're going to give it to her eventually. But at the same time, I keep wondering how much of this stuff has been deleted already. That's the one thing I'm wondering about as well. And if it was deleted, let's just say, oops, somebody slipped and hit the delete button, the only button that they tripped on, and they couldn't show proof, what could be her response to that then?
I mean, it would just depend on the circumstances. Sometimes that could justify a sanction if there is what's called spoliation of evidence, basically things that you're supposed to keep and preserve and hand over to the other side, and you don't do that, you get rid of it. That's sanctionable conduct. People can get in pretty bad trouble for that. Sometimes even things like, say you destroy evidence, the judge finds that you did that willfully. In some cases, they can instruct the jury that they need to presume that the reason why you destroyed that is because it went against your interests, that it was, contrary to your case. So it can really backfire in that sense, especially if it wasn't actually like a smoking gun, but you deleted it anyway. The jury is going to be instructed that they should consider, for all intents and purposes, that it was pretty much a smoking gun. So those types of things can be a consequence of it, or it can just be something that she is going to be able to absolutely nail them on in cross-examination. She's going to be able to hammer that from 5 ways to Sunday to show, this was not inadvertent. This was not a mistake that you made. This was a deliberate choice. This was dishonesty. If you're dishonest about this, how much else about this investigation have you been dishonest about?
Exactly. And that could be a whole big ass bombshell blowing off in the middle of the narrative for the prosecution. And it's called probable cause. Literally, that would just be napalm in the whole narrative. Because if they bring in any of those cops, interrogate them, bring in any of those people that are involved in anything revolving around the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, the DNA, how they found it, etc., and she's able to sit there and just keep attacking, and just breaking that person down or those individuals down to show corruption, it's a wrap, son. It's a wrap.
Yeah.
That is. But one thing I will say, hold on, real quick, is this though. What Raven McCall said though, jury pool is already a problem.
Mhm.
Now I want to talk about that real
Yes.
briefly because let's be real.
Mhm.
Everyone, for the most part, at least knows about the Idaho 4 tragedy.
Yes.
At least. They may
Yes.
not know the names. They may not know BK's name. Okay. They may not have their own nicknames for this mother lover or anything like that. Haven't been watching or following it like that, but they at least know that that is the guy that did this thing. Okay. What is the name? It starts with the B, right? I'm sure. Right. So the jury pool is already corrupt, or not corrupt, but it's already tainted because you got people who have been watching, following this case, etc. It's going to be very hard for the court to find a jury that's unbiased.
Yeah, and that doesn't matter where it happens either. That's the problem with, the scope of the coverage that this case has gotten. You can't move it to Boise and assume that nobody there has heard about it. As many people in Boise have heard about it as in Latah County. Another problem with the jury that hasn't gotten commented on, so I'm going to raise it here, is how once you pursue the death penalty, now you have to death qualify the jury. You cannot have on the jury anybody who is in principle opposed to the death penalty, who would not be able to inflict that penalty if the law called for it or it was appropriate. And so there have been quite a few studies, that enormous amount of research that's been done that indicates that death qualified juries are considerably more likely to convict than juries where they have ideological diversity. There's also quite a bit of evidence about how the decision-making process works. When you have this uniformity of thought on the jury, they are less likely to pay attention to details. They're less likely to remember what they listened to. It's just kind of alarming to see how this decision making works when you take the possibility of disagreement off the table. So that's going to be a whole other set of circumstances that the defense is going to be concerned about, that they're going to have to be kind of coming over this hurdle to convince people who are going to be inclined to convict, in all likelihood, to view this evidence with the skepticism that the law requires them to bring to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting whenever the trial actually happens. If it actually does happen in October, if it doesn't, if it gets pushed, etc., which I still have a feeling it's going to get pushed, given the fact that they only went through one motion today.
Yeah.
And they still got 3 other motions to try to get through. So there's a possibility that this is going to be pushed probably till 2024. But outside of that, I think it's very difficult, given the fact that this is such a huge national story.
Yes.
It's an international story, if you will. There's so many people that are watching this show, watching the story, if not this show, from all over the world that care, that are fixated over this situation. So I feel that it would be very difficult for either side to have an unbiased and fair thinking jury. So I do agree with Raven McCall as well. I think it's going to be very, very, very hard for them to make something like that happen, a full fair trial. But then again, I think this is the reason why a lot of this information is getting out, like the defense, their paperwork, their motions, etc. I think it's important because it gives us the other side now. And of course, it is swaying. Like I said before, the climate is changing now. At first, everyone's like, oh, him guilty. You know what I mean? He did that. And now we're hearing the defense say their piece. And it's kind of like, well, maybe he didn't. Wow. So it's very important when we get the documents, right? It changes the game, not just from getting some articles or, hearing it from a news personality or news anchor. It does change the game a lot when you see the actual paperwork, when you see the legal documents, but still, you still got to see proof. But go ahead.
It does, and it's an important distinction I want to make sure to make too, because I've seen a lot
Absolutely.
of people questioning, how does this not violate the gag order for the defense to be putting this type of information out there to the public? And the answer is the defense is litigating the case in court. They're doing exactly what you're supposed to do in this situation. They're not out talking to the media. They're not out giving interviews and, leaking selective pieces of information, providing sources, so on and so forth. They are presenting their case in court. That's why it's not a violation of the gag order. This is exactly how it's supposed to happen. And so if we focus our attention on that court process, I think we're going to find ourselves much likelier to be closer to the truth of the situation than if we are sort of lost in all of this noise that's going on in the media.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I agree 110%. And of course we're trying to get down to the truth of what actually happened. And I feel that that's what's going on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I say that weekly. I say both sides weekly because I don't know anymore. That's why I keep saying that I'm quite vexed now. I'm not sitting here saying that he's innocent. Oh, no, I'm not. But there's a lot of the paperwork. There's a lot of information that's been out that now makes me wonder, could there have been corruption? Could there have been some sort of foul play within the investigation? And I feel that that's not going to be something that's going to be answered today. I think that's going to be answered as time comes and the state actually shows their transparency, shows the paperwork, shows how they got the information, how they got the DNA, if they got it legally or whatnot. Everything, all the requests that they've received, that they've gotten from the defense, when they actually present those things and show full face transparency, then we can kind of come up with our own decision on what side we stand on. Mm-hmm. But for me, I'm 75. No, I'm more like 80-20. Because before it was 99.
I'll take it, Pascal.
I will
20 is movement.
I will keep it straight real with y'all. At first it was 99. I'm like, man, he did that. But now that I'm starting to hear corruption or the potential possibility of corruption, it does make me wonder, like, what did they do? What did they do? Mm-hmm. So I'm a little bit on that. I'm like I said, quite vexed today. Or at least, since the paperwork came out and dropped. So this is going to be very interesting. Over the next couple of weeks, it's going to be touch and go as we know it. And of course, when the state actually does present the proof on how they got their proof, we'll be here for it. Mm-hmm. We will be here for it. But when will they do it? We don't know. And maybe they will never present it. I don't know. We'll see. But that's very messed up. So, Andrea, I want to say a big thank you for being here, being on the show. It really does mean a lot. Everybody, if you really do appreciate, she's been on this show countless times. She has given you guys so much information. She has dropped and broken down so many things on this show in such a thorough way. If you guys aren't subscribed to her channel, then you are seriously smoking crack. I said it. Okay. So please go and follow her at A. Burkhart Law. Okay. On YouTube. She has a video, literally her recent video is getting some serious views, guys. It is the Bryan Kohberger not guilty. Defense drops new information in court document. Attorney explains. Okay. And obviously it says bombshell, no connection to victims as the thumbnail. Please go check that out. It is very, very well done. And it's short, which is nice. Okay. 20 minutes long. You got 20 minutes while you're washing the dishes, cooking something up. You know what I mean? You got 20 minutes. Use it, doing a yoga pose, whatever you do, take the time, subscribe to her channel. You'll thank me later. Okay. She is very, very knowledgeable. And again, thank you so much for being on. It really means a lot. And we'll be talking to you soon when more ish hits the fan.
We will be in touch. And I always appreciate the chance to come on your show, Pascal. You do great work here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll be talking to you soon.
We'll do it.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Listen, guys, that is the show. I want to say a big thank you to Andrea Burkhart for being here. Really, really fantastic. You guys already know. Okay. And if you don't know, then man, if you don't know, now you know. She's very, very good at what she does. So take the time, go subscribe to her channel. That would really, really mean a lot. All right. I think we got a lot. And this is what I was waiting for the longest time. Whoa. For the longest time. I was waiting for the longest time to have her on the show to talk about all this stuff. So we had to do a very big conversation about the documents, about all the stuff that's been going on and the hearing that happened today. So I do appreciate her being on and just giving us her professional opinion about all of this. So if you guys did appreciate the conversation, please do me a favor, hit that like button down below, crush it, just do that. Okay, a like doesn't cost a thing. It does help this channel grow, etc. Another way to help contribute in the growth of this channel, please hit that subscribe button. Okay, you know your boy's working hard out here in these streets. Okay, so hit that subscribe button. All right, hit that join button down below if you want to support the channel and become a family member, or even better, if you want to support the channel even further, please join my Patreon, patreon.com/The Pascal Show. Got some really, really great content over there. Been sharing a lot of stuff over there for my patrons and all that as well. So please go and join that if you can, please, and thank you. Anyway, guys, I appreciate all y'all for being here. Uh-oh, wait a second. We got Charlie Miller. Thank you so much for the 5. Assuming BK is innocent, can he sue the parties involved? And can the families of the demised or of the ones that have passed file lawsuits as well? Man, I wish Andrea was here to answer that question. I will say I don't know about him suing. I don't know if he can sue the families. I mean, I think if there was foul play involved, he could sue. He could sue the departments like Moscow PD. He could sue Albrightsville PD. He could sue. I know that. If there is foul play, if there was criminal activity, or if they did something in a criminal way. But I know that she would have a better answer for you than just good old me. Okay. But as far as the families go, I don't know. That's a very good question as well. Can the families, they could do a civil suit, kind of like OJ, like the OJ thing. He was acquitted, right? He was found not guilty. And then the family said, okay, if we can't get him this way, we're going to go for his pockets. And then he was found guilty in a civil lawsuit. So they could do that. They could. But Bryan Kohberger is a student with no money. So I don't know. I don't know about all that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. You know, if they really do feel that they got their man, if they really do feel like they got their man, they might not let up until they get him behind bars. Okay. But yes, we will talk more. Oh man, that's a Sadie. This is a very, very good question. Unfortunately, I have to jump off, but yes, that is a crazy, crazy, devastating story. And yes, no one's talking about that, which is really, really wild. Very, very wild. But anyway, guys, hit that like button down below, crush it, hit that subscribe button, hit that join button. Please hit join my Patreon, patreon.com/The Pascal Show. And I will be talking to you guys very soon. Okay. Appreciate all you guys for being here. It's time to get going. Be good to yourselves. Be good to one another. And I'll see you guys in the next show. This is The Pascal Show. Bye.